We've done this before in some of our teaching. We actually counted the number of words that Lucifer spoke to Eve in the Garden of Eden, starting with, Yea, hath God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden, ye shall not surely die, for God doth know the day that ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Exactly 46 words. Now that matches the number of chromosomes in our cells. In our cells, the number of chromosomes where our DNA is stored. Okay? Literally, what makes us up. By the way, our DNA always brings about death. Every man has died forever. Okay? Since this day, every man has died, and that's sort of built into our DNA. See, we already have the thorns built into us. I mentioned that earlier. We already have the sting of death built into us by way of our chromosomes, by way of our own DNA. This is why we need to be redeemed. Matthew chapter 7, verse 16, the Bible says, Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit. But a corrupt tree, notice how he's associating corrupt trees with thorns and thistles. A corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. Neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit, like thorns, is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them. Now, I had mentioned the 46 words that Lucifer spoke to Eve in the Garden of Eden, associated with our chromosomes, our DNA. And I mentioned when we read this earlier, I mentioned about the very words of the Scriptures, how they were used to describe what the soldiers did with Jesus. Now, number one, we have a crown. Okay, we have a king, something that reigns over mankind. We have thorns. We see the symbolism there. But notice in John chapter 19, verse 2, and the soldiers platted a crown of thorns. I have been studying the Bible, grew up in church. And I've read that thing I don't know how many times, and I decided to just go look up what the word plait means. When they platted a crown of, you know what it means? They braided it, wove it together. It was a symbol of DNA, the coiling DNA, the ribbon-like DNA, the strands woven together, plaited together, braided together is what they did. It's our own DNA that's ruling over us in our flesh. It's killing us, and it needs to be crucified. It needs to be killed. Let me throw this in here very quickly. We're talking about Freemasonry and their symbols, and they use this sprig of acacia, and I'll show you how in a little bit. They use the sprig of acacia, and there's a Masonic emblem where you have a woman. Now, a woman in all this symbolism always represents Mystery Babylon the Great, and she is a mother. And in this particular case, this mother is holding a sprig of acacia, or thorns, in her hand, and she is weeping over what Masons call the broken column. Now, the broken column in all the Masonic literature represents the god, like Osiris or Bacchus or Apollo or any of these other gods, who died and was broken up. And they're awaiting His resurrection. But here's the interesting thing associated with these thorns is that you have Saturn. Father Time, they call him, with wings. Saturn is another name for Satan. And you know what he's doing with her hair? He's braiding her hair to make ringlets, to make like DNA. Think about a column that was broken. 9/11, September 11th, 2001, 9/11. Remember the king of the bottomless pit. There was like 3 or 4 different versions of this that I saw after 9/11, and I caught on to the symbolism of it. Remember, we have Mystery Babylon, who is mourning over the broken column with acacia in her hand. And here we have these graphics of the Statue of Liberty, the goddess, with thorns coming. She has a crown of thorns, 7 of them. and she is weeping over the broken columns of 9/11. Here's what I was going to talk about last week the Lord said, wait, and I'll show it to you. I was dealing with these things, the issues that come out of the heart of mankind. And I've seen a lot of Catholic paintings of Jesus, and they always depict Jesus in various ways, usually with very subtle occult symbolism behind it. I want you to notice this particular Jesus, number one. He has his 3 fingers raised here. Remember what thorns represent: the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. But it's also as above, so below. We've talked about that in several videos. Things of heaven fusing together with things of the earth. As it was in the days of Noah, the floods came up from the ground, and the floods came down from the skies, and that is a picture of what's going to happen. Angels are going to fall from heaven, and beasts are going to rise up from the earth, and it's the flood of ungodliness that's going to sweep over planet Earth in days that could be coming very, very soon. And we see that image of Baphomet, who is he's got 2 fingers here, 3 fingers here, 23, and then he's making the opposite sign here, 23. That's 46. That's our chromosomes, where our DNA is stored. That's where the sting of death is built into us right now. But I want you to notice, we zoom in, and here's this fake Jesus. It's not the real Jesus. It's the Catholic Jesus, who is pointing to his heart, which has flames on it. Think about that. And surrounding the heart are thorns. Now remember, Jesus described thorns as being the deceitfulness of riches. We talked about this in last week's Watchman broadcast about things that deceive. You know what is the biggest deceiver in the world? The heart of man. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? The heart of man is. It's already got the thorns built in. Mark chapter 7, verse 21, here's what Jesus said about the heart of man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. They're in our hearts. And by the way, there are 13 things here. The York Rite of Freemasonry, we pointed this out. The York Rite of Freemasonry has 13 steps. You just ascend up the ladder and you'll receive this illumination thing, or you'll become a god, like what the serpent promised Eve in the Garden of Eden. But here we have 13 things that are already in our hearts. And you can't say, I don't have none of these, bless God. You've got them. This is why you need to get your plow out every now and then and plow up some ground. Okay? But I want you to notice the symbolism. In Revelation chapter 13, the number 13 is associated with the beast. Revelation 13, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now I want you to think about this. He's in the heart of the earth. That's where Jesus said he was going, and he went to preach to spirits that were in prison. So the beast is in the heart of the earth. And here is this graphic of Jesus pointing to a heart with thorns in it. Guess what this is all about. John said he saw the beast rising up out of the sea, and even our own hearts are surrounded by an ocean. It's called the pericardium. It's the sac around our heart. It's filled with salt water, by the way. When they pierced Jesus in the side, that sword pierced his pericardium and his heart. The Bible says blood and water issued forth. We're designed in such a beautiful way. The symbolism is here. And I'm telling you, this beast nature can come out of us. These thorns can come out and choke out every good thing that we want in life that comes from God if we're not really, really, really careful. Let's get into the teachings of Freemasonry very quickly concerning the acacia, concerning the thorns. Here's what Manly Hall said in the Secret Teachings of All Ages. He says, the body of Hiram was buried by the murderers over the brow of Mount Moriah, and a sprig of acacia placed upon the grave. Now, let me explain very quickly who Hiram Abiff is. Hiram Abiff, now he's mentioned in the Bible, but the Masonic Hiram is all of the gods throughout mythology that were murdered and are awaiting resurrection. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. But here in the Masonic Lodge, you go through the first 3 degrees. You with me here? You go through the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, and during this process, a play is acted out for you. And actually, you're a participant in the play. You actually become Hiram Abiff. Hiram Abiff is the guy who knew the secrets. He had the mysteries, and he wouldn't tell anybody. He was the builder of the temple, the body. I want you to think about that for a minute. And Hiram was murdered by 3 ruffians, by 3 men. The interesting thing is, when you go into Masonic Lodge and you see the reenactment of the murder of Hiram Abiff, by the way, if you're the initiate, you're Hiram. And they bring you down, and the 3 ruffians, they smite you. And the 3rd time they hit you on the head. And you receive a deadly wound in your head. That's what John saw in Revelation 13 concerning the beast. See, we're learning things, aren't we? And you receive a wound on your head, and I'm not making this up, in the Masonic Lodge you fall backward. And you're murdered. You are the slain God. Remember we said earlier about thorns. Proverbs talked about thorns and drunkards. Thorns and drunkards. They go hand in hand here. When Hiram is murdered, they place thorns over his body. You see a Masonic emblem of a casket with acacia on it. That's thorns. That's telling you what this is all about. And remember this, it's equal to drunkenness. And here we have a practice, and I'm not trying to be anybody's enemy. I'm not trying to say you're not saved or you're going to hell. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if we're going to be Christians, let's act the way the Bible tells us to act and get our learning and our knowledge from the Scriptures rather than from what we saw on television or what we went to church and they were doing at church. There is a difference. There's a practice called slain in the Spirit. You'll not find it in the Scriptures. None of the apostles practiced it. None of the early church did it. Jesus didn't do it. Nobody in the Bible ever did this thing. In fact, it didn't show up till, probably about 100 or so years ago. Slain in the Spirit. You know how it's done, don't you? They walk up, hit you on the head, you fall backward as dead. In fact, this whole idea of slain in the Spirit, slain means murdered. In what? In your spirit. Spiritually dead. Slain in the Spirit. And they say, well, it's like an act of resurrection. No, that's what baptism is supposed to represent. But not someone hitting you on the forehead and knocking you, and you literally becoming drunk in the Spirit. It is an unbiblical practice. It is the result, watch this, it is the result of people who disregarded the Scriptures, didn't let the doctrine come down as the rain and water their lives, and the thorns came in and started choking the Word out. This is a replacement for true biblical salvation and true spiritual indwelling. That's what it is. Manly Hall goes on to say concerning the acacia and concerning the thorns and Hiram, who is Osiris, Nimrod, Bacchus, Tammuz, the Bible talks about him. The chest containing the body of Osiris was washed ashore near Byblos and lodged in the roots of a tamarisk or acacia, which growing into a mighty tree enclosed within its trunk the body of the murdered God. Now remember what we read earlier, that a good tree cannot produce evil fruit or thorns, and an evil tree cannot produce good fruit. You never see apples on a thorn tree. Never. Okay? You never see oranges or grapes on a thorn tree. And so this idea that the murdered God represents a tree goes right back to the Garden of Eden, because there were 2 trees. One had good fruit, one had bad fruit. One gave life, the other one had the sting